This is Ronald Coleman, inviting you to radio's most dramatic half hour, Favorite Story. Through this same radio loudspeaker that's bringing you my voice this moment, you've heard hundreds of comedy programs accompanied by gales of laughter. But some of the most amusing situations in the world provoke rather the warm chuckle and the knowing smile. Ozzie Nelson and Harriet Hilliard have chosen as their favorite story the adventure of two elderly Pennsylvania widows on their way to Japan in a leaky boat. It's a classic of American humor. Frank R. Stockton gave his novel what must be almost the longest title on record, The Casting Away of Mrs. Lecks and Mrs. Aleshine. May I ask that you picture Mrs. Lecks as a tall, gaunt, bony woman with stringy hair and brass-rimmed spectacles. Mrs. Aleshine is squat and dumpy, plump as a Christmas pudding, with high-button shoes and a hat that looks like a potted geranium. All right, we're all set for Act One of Ozzie and Harriet's favorite story.
I know what you're thinking. You're saying to yourself that what I'm about to tell you is a tissue of lies. You refuse to believe that two characters named Mrs. Lecks and Mrs. Aleshine could possibly exist. Well, my friend, just skim through your copy of the telephone directory, and you'll find names enough to convince you that Barbary Aleshine and Mrs. Lecks could exist. Now, I will admit that the casting away of these two ladies is a development which you may find a little hard to swallow. But it did happen. I was with them, and I know. Mrs. Lecks and Mrs. Aleshine came into my life in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. I was leaning on the rail of a steamship bound from San Francisco to Yokohama. My stomach and the Pacific Ocean were engaged in a heated debate over some lunch which I had just eaten in the dining room, and I had a strong presentiment that the Pacific Ocean was about to win. I heard voices behind me. I had the vague feeling they were talking about me, but I didn't much care.
Barbary Aleshine. Barbary Aleshine.
Now, don't you interrupt me, Mrs. Lecks, till I finish this row. I never can remember whether I'm knitting or purling.
Barbary, there's something very peculiar about that young man up there leaning on the rail.
Oh, looks kind of peaked, don't he?
That is what I think. They ain't giving him enough decent victuals in the dining room.
Ain't it a shame? I tell you, Mrs. Lecks, the victuals they serve up on their steamship ain't fitting for a well-bred hog.
Young man. You there, young man.
Are you addressing me, madam?
Mrs. Aleshine and me have been watching you, young man. And we noticed you look a mite pale round the gills.
Needs nourishment, that's what he does. Poor fellow.
Anything we can do to help?
No, I'll be all right. I think.
Oh, here, young man. Now, you just help yourself to some of these jelly sandwiches.
Jelly! Oh, thank you.
It's fresh gooseberry. Put it up myself.
Now, Barbary, maybe he ain't over fond of gooseberry. How about some quince preserves, young man? Them brown bread sandwiches is quince.
Quince?
Help yourself.
Ladies, your kindness overwhelms me, but I'm afraid I'm not in the eating mood.
Oh, Mrs. Lecks, look at him real good. I do believe he's got a touch of dyspepsy.
Young man, you just take a whiff of these smelling salts, and you'll feel chipper as a gray squirrel in less time than it takes to say it.
Now you sit right down here in this deck chair and let them smelling salts clear your head.
Now, breathe in deep.
There, that's the idea.
Feeling better already, ain't you?
Matter of fact, I am.
Well, yes.
Just what the doctor ordered.
You know, Mrs. Lecks, I reckon he's just about the same age as my son in Tokyo.
Oh.
You have a son in Japan, madam?
Barbary does. Her son's in the yard goods business in Tokyo. We're just going to drop in on him to pay a call.
We ain't neither of us been no respectable distance away from home before.
Except in the time my late husband took me up the state fair now, too.
Oh, but that wasn't nearly so far away as Japan.
Where do you come from, young man?
Well, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Craig. I'm a newspaper man from New York City.
New York City? Oh, then I expect probably you know an uncle of my late husband. Name of, Grutenheimer. Do you recollect the name?
Grutenheimer?
Grutenheimer, yes.
No, I regret to say I haven't met all the people in New York City.
Oh, of course not. Barbara Aleshine, you just got to realize New York City is a whole lot bigger than Meadowville. Barbara and me comes from Meadowville, PA.
Well, how you feeling now, young man?
Better, Mrs. Aleshine. Much better. Did you say the brown bread sandwiches were quince preserved?
That's right. And the others is my gooseberry steak.
Oh, goodness, what happened?
What the devil is going on?
Lord of mercy, what was that?
Feels to me as if we've run aground.
Well, I wish they wouldn't surprise the body that way. Made me drop 2 stitches in my knitting.
Why, I do believe they're having a fire drill of some sort, Mr. Craig. Look at them people up there putting on lights.
Yes, running around like chickens with their heads cut off. And they ought to be sitting back digesting their noonday meal.
Mrs. Aleshine, Mrs. Lecks, this may be serious. I think the ship is starting to list.
Well, Barbara and me don't give no never mind if it lifts, just so long as it don't tip over to one side.
Excuse me, there's the captain. I'm going up and asking what's wrong.
Get into a life preserver, man. I'm going to give the order to abandon
Yeah,
ship.
but what's happened, sir?
We've scraped the reef. It's not listed on the charts.
Oh.
The pumps are useless. There's a gash on our starboard side big enough to drive a truck through.
Great heaven, Captain, what do we do?
Take to the lifeboats as fast as possible.
Right.
There's not 1 second to lose.
Yes.
And pray to God to look after us all.
Lower those sails, Mrs. Lecks! Mrs. Aleshine! Mrs. Lecks!
Knit 2, purl 2. Knit 2,
Ladies, get into life preservers immediately.
Land sakes, what for?
The ship is sinking.
Oh.
In another 10 minutes, we'll be at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean.
Oh, now ain't that provoking. Barbara Aleshine, I swear to you this is the last time we'll ever give our business to this here steamship company.
What seems to be wrong?
The
Mr.
ship
Craig?
ran into a rock, that's all.
Well, you'd think they'd be a mite more careful how they steered this boat. With all this water hereabouts, seems to me a body would have to be awful careless to go bumping around into rocks. Ain't that your impression, Barbara?
That's my sentiments exactly, Mrs. Lecks, to the letter.
Ladies, for the love of heaven, hurry up there to the prow of the ship and get a place in one of those lifeboats or you'll be drowned.
Now, don't go getting high and mighty, Mr. Craig.
Oh.
Appears to me we got ourselves in a bit of a pickle, Barbara.
I suppose so, Mrs. Lecks. But I must say, I like the excitement.
Mrs. Lecks, Mrs. Aleshine, I beg you, those lifeboats are all going to be filled up in a few minutes.
Too filled up, if you ask me.
Too filled up for comfort.
My steamship ticket reads first-class private accommodation, Mr. Craig, and I don't rightly see how they can expect us to double up with a lot of other folks we ain't even been introduced to.
Would you rather drown?
That's entirely beside the point. What do you reckon we ought to do, Barbara Aleshine?
Well, let me see. I just took notice of a little boat tied up by the railing here. See?
Where? Why, it's a lifeboat. Yeah, with water kegs and provisions.
And nobody in it. Not a soul.
It's my impression this boat was probably reserved for the captain and some officers. But we've got just as much right to it as any of them do.
More. Because we had nothing to do with the steering and smashing.
All right, ladies, we'll take this boat. For the love of heaven, let's hurry.
Oh, are you coming with us, Mr. Craig?
Come on.
Well, I don't know as it's exactly proper.
Now, this ain't no time to be over-righteous, Barbara Aleshine. Especially since you and me don't know beans about rowing.
Will you please get down there into that boat, or am I going to have to shove you?
Now, don't you get so huffy, Mr. Craig. Remember, you can draw a lot more flies with sugar than you can with vinegar.
Oh, my goodness gracious. How are we going to get way down there to that little boat? There ain't no steps.
You're going to have to scramble down this rope.
Oh, this is going to be a scratchy business. Well, you watch me, Barbara Aleshine. I'll go first to show you how.
Oh, no, wait, no, we can't go yet. Now, wait.
Why? What's the matter?
I forgot my parasol.
My, you certainly are working up a sweat there, Mr. Craig.
Well, I'm trying to keep up with the other lifeboats. I can't seem to do it.
You know, Mr. Craig, I don't think this boat has been emptied out since the last rain. Seems like my feet are wet through.
That's peculiar, Barbary. I didn't notice no water in the boat before.
Hey, neither did I. Maybe that's why I've had so much trouble rowing.
Why would that be, Mr. Craig?
Now, don't tell me there's something the matter with the floor.
Ladies, this boat has a leak in it.
Another one?
Yes.
Appears to me this steamship company ought to be in the sieve business.
Well, Mrs. Lecks, that explains why this boat wasn't filled up. Oh, we should have known better to expect to have a whole boat just for the three of us.
Now, Barbary Aleshine, don't you go find fault with good fortune when it comes to you. Here, we've got a nice, comfortable boat with room enough to sit easy and stretch out if we want to.
But, Mrs. Lecks, this boat is going to be sunk in a few minutes, too.
Oh, no. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Oh, ladies, I don't think you have any idea how desperate this predicament is.
Mr. Craig, look.
Look, where?
Where I'm pointing, young man. You see something black amongst the waves, or don't you?
Oh, maybe it's one of the other lifeboats.
No, tain't, Barbary. All them lifeboats went t'other direction.
Mrs. Lecks, I believe it's land.
Well, if it's land, I think we might just as well stop there for a while. Don't you, Mr. Craig?
Well, no use rowing. Boat is almost underwater. Do either of you ladies swim?
Swim? Oh, Dad's sake, no.
Oh, no, don't be silly, Mr. Craig. We never swum in our whole lives.
Well, you're going to learn mighty soon.
Now, don't make things worse, Barbary Aleshine, by tumbling overboard.
No, of course.
We've got to go into the water. Let's do it decently and in order.
Well, now, what do you think we ought to do, Mrs. Lake?
I recommend we stand up and let the boat sink under us.
Huh?
Yeah, that'll save us rolling out any which way, which might be awkward.
You're absolutely right, Mrs. Lecks. It's a deal of a lot better to be let down gradual than to plop into the water all of a bunch.
Well, steady now, ladies. The lifeboat's going under.
Oh, ain't it a lot? Oh, feels like an oyster crawling up my back.
After two boats sinking under us, I hope this life preserver ain't got a leak in it. If it don't hold up, I certainly am going to have some hard things to say to them steamship people.
Hold your breath, everybody. We're going under. Steady,
I
ladies.
thought it could be so cold. Tastes worse than brine water.
Well, to tell the truth, Mrs. Lecks, I prefer a tub. It ain't so roomy as this, but it's more comforting somehow.
The life preserver's holding you up?
Snug as a bug.
Oh, now, see here, ladies. Each of you take one oar. And if you paddle with it, I think you can make some headway toward the island.
Like this.
Mr. Craig,
Well, that's the general idea. But work it just as if it was a broom and you were sweeping the floor.
Oh, like a broom.
Oh, we get the idea, Miss Craig.
But I don't mind telling you there's one thing I'm powerful afeard of. And if it happens, it's just going to spoil my day.
What's that, Mrs. Aleshine?
Well, we're both going to be very provoked with you, Mr. Craig. If this island you're taking us to is inhabited by man-eaten cannonballs.
We're bringing you the favorite story of one of America's favorite radio teams, Ozzie and Harriet. Their favorite story is Frank R. Stockton's astonishing account of the casting away of Mrs. Lecks and Mrs. Aleshine. Now, we left these dear ladies with their bewildered escort, Mr. Craig, smack in the middle of the world's biggest ocean. What would lie ahead of them? Could they reach the desert island? And if they did, would they be greeted by the poisoned arrows of some native aborigines?
Well, bless my soul.
Land of Goshen.
A house.
Pretty gables and furbelows, ain't they?
Lace curtains at the windows.
Genteel folk, it appears to me.
Well off, too, from the looks of things. Oh, that veranda could stand a fresh coat of paint for spring.
You know, it seems a mite peculiar to me they should build a house like this so far out from town.
Well, what are we standing here for? Time we let these people know they got company.
Oh, no, Mrs. Lecks. I'd like to be less dripping before I make a call on genteel folk.
If you're too proud to go in as you are, Barbary Aleshine, You can just sit in the sun till you're dry. As for me, I'm going to ask for the lady of the house. If she don't like me, she can lump me, as long as she gives me something to eat and a dry bed to get into. What do you say, Mr. Craig? Mr. Craig, what do you say?
I'm flabbergasted.
In my belief, they're not to home.
I think you're probably right, Miss Lecks.
I wonder if there's another house in the neighborhood.
It's not my feeling that this neighborhood is very thickly settled.
Well, my recommendation is we go right on in and make ourselves at home.
Without being invited, Mr. Craig?
Why not?
Why, but that's housebreaking.
Housebreaking or no, we're going inside.
Well, you should have seen those two women when they got inside that house. They headed, by instinct, I suppose, straight for the kitchen. The pantry was well stocked with staples. A flour barrel nearly full, plenty of tea and biscuits, salt and pepper and spices, and tins of fruits and vegetables of all sorts and kinds. In less than an hour, Mrs. Lecks and Mrs. Aleshine had things humming.
Did you get the flour bin rinsed out, Barbary?
Oh, done that long ago, Mrs. Lex.
Good.
I'm just cleaning off these window blinds with ammonia water.
Oh.
Oh. You know, I've always heard the people who live on desert islands was barbarians. But I just can't fathom barbarians having ammonia water in a broom closet. Can you?
Moreover, Barbary Aleshine, barbarians don't have Bibles.
Bibles?
Look right here on this shelf. King James Authorized Version. And see what it says on the fly leaf.
Oh, wait till I get on my steps. A. Dusanti. That must be the man's name who lives in this house.
Must be. And there's another name underneath it, too.
Oh, yes. Emily Dusanti. Oh, now, ain't that a right pretty name? Emily Dusanti. Do you reckon Emily is Mr. Dusanti's wife or his daughter?
Could be his sister or his aunt.
Or his cousin? Or his mother? Or his grandmother?
Oh, I doubt very much if his grandmother would be living. I picture Mr. Dusanti as middle-aged or older. Mutton chop whiskers type.
Oh, land of Goshen.
What you land of Goshen about?
Do you realize, Mrs. Lex, what we're doing here? Oh, my. We're a rooming and boarding off Emily and Mr. Dusanti without paying them for their trouble.
But they're not at home.
Oh, my, you, Mr. Gray.
What trouble is it to the Dusantis?
I don't know what is commonly charged in a place like this, but I know you can get very good board where I come from for $6 a week.
Yes, that's for two in a room. But having a room all to himself would make it more for Mr. Gray.
Well, it ain't his fault that he ain't got a brother or some friend to take part of the expense. At the most, I figure Mr. Craig oughtn't to pay more than $7 for having a room to himself.
That seems fair enough.
Well, that's settled then.
Oh, yeah, but you got to consider we do the cooking in the house, Rick. That ought to be counted.
I was coming to that, Barbary Aleshine. You just hold your horses.
All right.
Now, if me and Mrs. Aleshine was to go out to service, which is very unlikely, seeing as our late husband's insurance monies left us out of poverty's reach.
Thanks the Lord.
But if we was to do it, we wouldn't go into nobody's family for less than $2 a week.
A piece.
That's correct, Barbary.
Oh, I know. What about Mr. Craig working in the garden?
Oh, is there a garden?
There's a nice bed of sparrowgrass out by the back stoop. For working that and painting the veranda, I figure, well, 50 cents a day is as little as any man could work for. That will make $3 to take out of Mr. Craig's board, leaving us $4 a week, the same as ours.
There's only one trouble, Mrs. Lex. Since there's no proprietor to this boarding house, whom do we pay?
I got that figured out, too. There's a jar on the mantelpiece there, the kind East Indy ginger comes in.
Yes, yes.
Got nothing in it now, saving some brown paper which fish hooks was wrapped in. We come here on a Wednesday, so every Tuesday night we'll each put $4 in that jar under the fish hook paper. Then, if by day or night the Dusantis come back and make a fuss about our being here, all we got to do is say, the board money's in the ginger jar, and our consciences is free.
And our consciences were free. You'd be surprised how pleasant life can be on a desert island, especially with a housekeeper like Mrs. Lex and a cook like Mrs. Aleshine. We lived kingly for, I don't know how many months exactly. All I know is the ginger jar was getting filled up higher and higher with our board money, until the fishhooks paper was practically shoved out the top. But they say all good things must come to an end. One day while I was hoeing in the bed of sparrow grass, I heard Mrs. Lecks shout through the kitchen window.
A ship! Look, a ship!
Hello!
Hello there!
It's them, Barbara, Aleshine. The DeSantis are coming.
Hello! Comment ça va?
What's he saying?
Oh, he's talking gibberish.
No, wait a minute. I think he's a Frenchman. Sir, we're Americans. Do you speak English?
Most assuredly, mes amis. I speak English, but my daughter Emily speaks only French.
See, Barbara, I told you Emily was his daughter. I suppose you're Mr. DeSantis.
Monsieur Toussaint. But tell me, how did you know my name?
Oh, well, we've seen your name and Emily's in your family Bible.
Monsieur Toussaint, we were cast away here after a shipwreck.
Oh?
And we had no choice but to make ourselves at home.
But of course, I would have expected it.
However, Mr. DeSantis, don't think we've been a-living off you all these months for nothing. No, sirree, sir. If you look on the mantelpiece in the ginger jar underneath the fishhooks paper, you'll find each one of us has paid $4 a week apiece for our board and room for each week we've been here.
Yes, that's 19 weeks, Mr. Dusanti.
Yes.
Which means there's $228 in the ginger jar, carrying us up to and including next Tuesday night.
But this is preposterous.
Preposterous? What's preposterous about it?
Permit me to explain. I am a missionary. My life is dedicated to helping my fellow man.
Oh.
I could not possibly accept a profit of $200 or more dollars because of your misfortune.
You mean you won't take the board money in the ginger jar?
But no, you are shipwrecked here. To take your money would be an outrage to human charity.
Oh, is that so, Mr. Dusanti?
Well, we've got our opinions about charity, too. And I'm telling you, Barbary, Aleshine, and me won't accept no charity.
No. When we stays for weeks and weeks without leave or license in a man's
We pay our board. Good afternoon, Mr. DeSantis.
Well, we had quite a problem on our hands. We actually had only 2 weeks to settle it. For in 2 weeks, the steamer would return to carry us the rest of the way on our journey to Japan. And there seemed to be no solution which would be acceptable to all parties concerned. Then, suddenly, I noticed a most peculiar change in the attitude of Mrs. Lecks and Mrs. Aleshine.
Mrs. Lecks,
Yes, Mrs. Aleshine.
have you noticed what simply beautiful hair that Emily Dusanti has?
Like the silk on a prize-winning ear of corn at the state fair.
And have you noticed how smooth complected she is?
Skin like buttercream in a pitcher. I've noticed, Barbara.
And have you observed the color of her lips?
Red as a Pennsylvania tomato on the vine. Oh, I tell you, Barbara Aleshine, that Emily Dusanti is going to make a mighty fine wife for some smart man.
Too bad she don't talk English.
Hush, Barbara, you'll spoil everything. Yes, Emily Dusanti certainly will make some man a fine wife.
It required no intelligence whatsoever to realize that these remarks were directed for my benefit. Though I was pretty much at a loss to see why Mrs. Lecks and Mrs. Aleshine were so anxious to make a match between Emily Dusanti and myself. Frankly, they were right about her beauty. She was perhaps 18 years old, in the full bloom of youth, and of a most cheerful, sunny disposition. Each evening we came to the habit of watching the sun set over the ocean together. And although we hardly knew a word of each other's language, we discovered that for a young man and a young woman, there are other means of communication. I had to admit it, I was rapidly falling in love. The night before the steamship was to return and take us from the DeSantis Island, perhaps forever, I made a passionate speech to Emily. I begged her to become my wife, and I was the happiest man in the world when she answered,
Well, I must say, Mr. Craig, you took your own sweet time about asking her.
What does we mean, Mrs. Lecks? Is that yes or no?
Barbara Aleshine, sometimes you don't have the sense of a groundhog in February. Just one look at the faces on them young'uns, and you can tell that we means nothing but yes, sirree.
Just one question, ladies. Why in the name of heaven are you so confounded anxious to get me married?
Why, we couldn't have left this island till you got married.
It was the only solution.
The only solution to what?
Oh, Mr. DeSantis,
Yes, Madame Aleshine.
you can bring it out here now.
I'm bringing it.
Bringing what? What is he bringing? What's this all about?
Here you are, Monsieur Craig. We all give this to you with our blessing.
For me?
For you and Emily.
It's your dowry.
Dowry?
Well, land of Goshen, what else could we do with the board money in the ginger jar?
For the past half hour, we've been cast away with Mrs. Lecks and Mrs. Aleshine, as described in Frank R. Stockton's famous novel. My congratulations to our favorite story cast, to Jane Morgan, who played Mrs. Lecks, and to Lurene Tuttle, who made such a convincing Mrs. Aleshine. The perplexed Mr. Craig was the familiar voice of Ben Alexander, and the radio favorites Ozzie Nelson and Harriet Hilliard chose this week's favorite story. Next week, one of history's great adventures, the story of a great trek into the rising sun. It's the adventures of Marco Polo, and it was selected as the favorite story of America's great stage actress, Miss Eve Le Gallienne. We'll travel with Messer Marco from the ancient city of Venice, through the lofty heights of Tibet, into the courtroom of the mighty Kublai Khan. We hope you'll be listening.